Charlie Kirk is a super right-wing MAGA Christian nationalist. Y'all can stop me when I'm wrong, or if y'all need to add stuff to that. He goes on a tour. I guess he's on a tour, right? He debates people about policy, about race, about religion, about anything. And he was asked a question about gun violence in America. As he began to answer the question and basically say something along the lines of, and ask kind of a rhetorical question like, well, how many of these issues of gun violence came from gang members? He was shot in the neck. And I haven't seen the video, but based off of what people were saying, he died pretty quickly. Say about 6 or 7 seconds, and he was, you could tell in his body he was done. And so from that, there's been a really interesting dynamic that has sprung forth, and the course has specifically come into the lens of Christianity, where a lot of conservative Christians, I'm moving my screen over, there we go. A lot of conservative Christians have championed him as a martyr. He is he was a professed Christian, right? And there are clips of him saying things like, Jesus is my anchor, and I couldn't do this without the power of God, and yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. But when you see all of the talking points people aren't digging to get these clips. Like they've always been readily available. These clips are very, Shane, what up? These clips are very racist, homophobic, sexist, harmful to non-US citizens, to Black people, people of color in general. And so it's kind of created this really interesting discourse, because his posture and his position when he would say these things, it was very harsh. It was very harsh. I could, and maybe I should, where's that? There's a compilation that I could share of like some of, let me see, hold up.
I have a 2-page Google Doc with a bunch of quotes and stuff from him, because I've been aware of him for years. So
go for it.
All right.
Go for it. Read the greatest hits.
All right. So the one that everybody's circulating right now is basically his views on gun violence. I don't have the direct quote, but basically he's like, hey, it is what it is. If some people are going to have to die in order for us to keep the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. Keep in mind, this is something that's not being shared as context. He was saying that in regards to that Nashville school shooting last year. So he was saying that it's fine for kids to die, basically. Another thing, after George Floyd's death, he called him a scumbag. Juneteenth thinks the 1960 civil rights movement was a mistake. In regards to education, which is a very big part of his whole thing, he thinks college is a scam. He didn't get into the college of his choice, and he claims that it's because of affirmative action, and they gave it to some less qualified person of a different gender and different persuasion, was his quote. He thinks women should only go to college to find a husband. He described anything LGBTQ related as sexual anarchy. Let's see. Didn't believe in free school lunch for kids. Claimed that there are no kids that are going hungry in America. In regards to Christian nationalism, he did not believe in the separation of church and state, unless it was the separation between church and Islam, or Islam and state. That was the only place it mattered to him. He thought empathy was a new age term. He thought that the left wants to get rid of Christianity and replace it with pseudo-religions like anti-racism, environmentalism, because caring about the environment and being an environmentalist is earth worship, and Islam. Let's see, what else is there? There's a lot of stuff about Islam.
What did he say about Michelle Obama?
Michelle Obama? Oh, I don't have that one. You're going to have to tell me that one.
Anybody have that quote? Then he said something along the lines of she was like a bird brain or something. He said something crazy about her and other Black women.
Yeah, he was talking. I know the quote. I think I know what you're talking about. He was going in on a bunch of Black women that were in like powerful positions, and basically claimed, because there was like a congresswoman at the time that did a speech where she was talking about how she would not be where she is today without affirmative action. And while it got her in the door, it did not she didn't graduate because of affirmative action. she graduated because of her work ethic and her intellect and things like that. But he was implying that, like, oh, affirmative action is just getting a bunch of unqualified people in, because obviously if he thinks that a potentially Black woman took his place at a college that he wanted to go to, that's going to be his view. Keep in mind, by the way, he was 18 when he started his company, Turning Point USA, and it was funded by billionaires. That's another thing to throw out there too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but like he was a big anti-DEI and affirmative action person, lots of racist dog whistles, thinks Black people commit more crimes than white people.
Yeah, I know. I
There
know he
was a
said something about black men traditionally. I think he said 80%, and he quoted Thomas Sowell because, of course, he did. I think he said 80% of Black men impregnate Black women and leave them.
yes, which I've seen
Yeah.
people debunk that. Like earlier this year, I saw somebody debunking that, and it was
Okay.
like, well, actually, Black men are more actively involved in their children's relationships than other people.
That's right.
But
Absolutely.
twisting stats and data, that's a thing that far right people like to do, especially when it comes to Black people and crime and inner family relationships, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He thought that women over 30 that are single are bitter, angry, and unattractive in the dating pool. And he thought that the idea of consent creates gray areas.
All right.
Yeah. And there's more. Like he's been doing this since like he's 31. So that means that he was a year older than me. And he started this
Mm-hmm.
when he was 18. He's been doing this for like 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
There's 13 years of this because he would do these college campus tours this entire time to make content, to pump it out, to make people angry and like rile up his base to make a bunch of money.
Now, does anybody have context for how his rhetoric infiltrated Christian spaces?
I'm not fully for sure, but I have seen like clips of like him like, you know, proclaiming his Christianity, talking with an atheist, and I think which actually a clip that Proper Excel posted and everything, and I was like, guys, I'm not surprised, but it's like it was just like in that aspect of it, it's so, but also just historically speaking, like white males have been usually coded or tied with evangelicalism, so it's like it makes it makes sense. So him being able to get some association with Christians and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
especially if he's like espousing to like, especially with that type of clip, like you're going up against an atheist and you're like standing 10 toes down, like you're our champion. Whereas in the back of my head, I'm like, is this y'all king?
Right.
Like Killmonger, like
Right.
Yeah, it really
yo,
is.
this your
Oh, sorry.
I'm actually seeing, I was very to say, I'm actually seeing something online right now, and I can't confirm or deny it, but it says, after years of focusing on libertarian and secular arguments for his young audience, Kirk pivoted to a Christian nationalist stance around 2019. He began asserting that the U.S. was founded as a Christian nation and that Christians should reclaim positions of power in society, reversing his earlier affirmation of the separation of church and state. And he kind of confirmed this in 2021 when he launched Turning Point Faith to formalize his outreach to religious communities. And it's designed to train pastors to become more politically outspoken and to encourage civic engagement within churches. So he counter none other than Walter's.
Yeah, that's probably true.
It makes sense. First of all, the timing of the pivot is perfect. Right before the pandemic, everybody is my introduction to him was around that time, 2020, 2021. Everybody's on their phone. There's a lot of they call it, red pill, hyper masculinity, like all of those movements were gaining a lot of that steam during that time. So your what's homie's name? Kevin Samuels and different people like that were coming into more prominence. So that makes sense that in true fashion, the church as naive as it can be, all you gotta do is proclaim Jesus and people are like, they'll embrace you and welcome you with open arms. So I have some spots that I want to try to tackle this from, because I'm just ready to get to the shenanigans. but I want to know where y'all want to start. So we could discuss this from a lens of martyrdom. We could talk about spiritual bypassing. We could talk about this idea of that he died over a difference of opinion. We could talk about whiteness in proximity to Christianity. We could talk about sanitizing and how people are sanitizing what he said because he proclaimed to be a Christian and like cleaning it up and making it nice and well, everybody makes mistakes, but, just very like making excuses. This idea of mourning because he leaves behind a wife and child. And then finally, just an overall view of like deconstruction and American Christianity, mainstream Christianity. Is there any place that people are kind of burning where you want to start?
I would love if we can start with like martyrdom. It's a subject that's really, really interesting to me because I can't say that I fully understand it, right? And I'd love to understand what would be the representation of like somebody like a good martyr, right, versus a bad martyr. Because like some of these other individuals that I think people associate with martyrdom or martyrdom, I'm not sure like the correct pronunciation of that, but some of those other people that get correlated or affiliated with that, I don't feel like they set out to do that. And maybe that's just my lack of understanding of what the concept of martyrdom is, or of being a martyr is. So I'd love to just hear kind of what you guys are thinking on that.
So my initial thought when I think of the idea of martyrdom is that I don't, like you said, I don't think anybody chooses to be a martyr. I think that is a label that is placed on them. I can't say that word after they die. I'll say it that way because I can't pronounce the other word. Postmethiously or whatever. So yes, thank you. So I think that a lot of it is just a label that's placed on people after they've died for a cause. And I think when you look at the perspective of martyrdom with Christianity, American Christians, this is my hot take about Christianity, American Christianity has a persecution complex. They want to believe so bad that we are persecuted here in America and that we're the underdogs. Even when they're winning, like when Christian nationalism is winning, somehow they're magically the underdog. So having somebody who professed to be a Christian and was weaseling around the conversation of Christian nationalism, there's some clips of him like saying, well, I'm a Christian and I'm a nationalist, but he acts like those are two separate things, but it's the same thing in reality. For how he operates, having somebody that professed to be a Christian being killed, it gives ammunition to people that have that persecution complex to be like, oh, he died because people didn't like what he was saying because he was Christian and things like that. On the other side of that, when you start talking about the political aspect, there is like, he was one of the most prominent voices on the far right. He wasn't the furthest right, but he was one of the loudest on the far right. And he had a big platform and a direct connection to the president. So because of that, a little bit of this is, in my opinion, people using his death as an opportunity to do certain things and get away with certain things, which that's something that I was actually thinking about, to be completely honest with you, because a random history fact that I know for whatever reason, there's echoes of like 90s Germany and all this right now. So like back in 1933, an arsonist burned down the German parliament. And this was right after Hitler came into power. And as a result, like he happened to be a communist. So they then said it's an organized communist movement to do all these things. And they started enacting all these laws to basically persecute their political enemies and basically say, hey, they're dangerous. You can't trust them because they're trying to like destroy everything. And the echoes of that are in the way that like Trump's speech that he did yesterday was, where he's talking about the far right or the far left and all these other things and all those things. And it's like just it's giving echoes of we're using this as an excuse to basically justify getting rid of people that are in our out group. And right now they're starting with immigrants, and eventually they've already said before, like they wanted to get rid of people that were actual citizens and that just don't agree with them. Because at the end of the day, their end goal is like to create a white ethno state. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the idea of martyrdom. It's all people weaponizing to feed their own motives.
Go ahead, Shane.
I was just gonna say it's like, I guess speaking to Nietzsche's point of this, like the idea behind just giving some context to that, to the word martyr and everything. Of course, it's about someone who dies for their cause contextually. When we were talking about, when Christians are talking about it, it's like those who died for like their Christian ideals and ideals of philosophy. And so, and that's what the narrative is that is trying to be painted. Is like, again, this man was this upstanding Christian who stood for his beliefs, who stood for standing up for Christian values, which, as we saw from all those quotes Jordan mentioned, I'm like, there was some very unchristian things in there, and so it's like, it's yeah, it's so in that aspect of it, it's like, I don't know, like y'all are doing more y'all are y'all are doing more stretching of the truth than a Cowboys fan trying to prove that you're going to go to the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, well, inside of that, I'm just gonna bypass that shot, but inside
I am a
of
Cowboys
that,
fan, and I know we're not going.
I know. But I was just saying, like, I sent Armand a post on Threads today, and it was a screenshot of, like, kind of in that same vein that you're talking about, Shane, like, you know, we're going to stand up because, you know, they're trying to oppress this message that's going out. And the thread that I sent Armand says, we don't know the shooter yet. We don't have a motive. But the evangelical industrial complex is already filling in the gaps with a self-serving narrative, right? So he died because he was an outspoken Christian. Well, we don't actually know that. Like, we've taken this thing and we've jumped so far. But the narrative, right, that they've tried to attach this narrative to it that has nothing to do necessarily, like nothing is proven. It's all up in the air. And we're talking about hours after it happened, minutes after it happened. And so tying that back to the question of martyrdom, it feels like even the idea of martyrdom, you die for your beliefs, is such a oversimplification of what martyrdom is. I mean, even just we've talked for 10, 15 minutes about it, trying to provide nuance and trying to provide clarity around what it actually is. And that, unfortunately, talking about Christian nationalism and the MAGA movement, it's all these oversimplified concepts to try and grasp at something for power. Right? We'll go after this for power. Even going back to how I got introduced to Charlie Kirk was, I don't know if it was Jubilee or if it was just his own thing, but was his, actually it was a recording from one of his debates about abortion. And so to me, I see that as how he got tied into the Christian nationalist movement because he was against abortion. And so, like Shane was saying, that's our champion now because he owned the libs, he owned the left, he owned the pro-choice side. And now that's going to be the one that we're going to push because there's power there.
Hey, Hector. I'm sorry. I so hate cutting people off, but
Yeah,
I have a
no, you're
question
good.
too. I have a question to something you just said, right? And so what I'm kind of gathering from everybody is that obviously, like, it's us, the people, or the people who kind of support your views and, you know, the whatever it is that you represent that pretty much give you the label as martyr, right? And I'm wondering at this current stage, is it what's the criteria, right, for martyrdom? And then, like, how do the people who are on the opposing side of that, right? How do we make sure that, excuse me, how do we make sure that that doesn't go into like this? I mean, this man he shouldn't be labeled a martyr. Like, you know what I'm saying? By definition that we've discussed here. So like, what is our responsibility in that? So that, I know it's kind of a two-part question, but yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
No,
no,
it's good.
yeah. So first of all, let's define martyrdom. So the definition, I was just about to pull one out of my head, but let's just go to the internet. So martyrdom definition. So the definition of a martyr, it is a person who is killed because their religious or other beliefs. So pretty clear, right? So because Charlie Kirk was spewing or sprinkling, you know, scripture in his rhetoric and was like hitting these hot button topics like abortion, like gun control, and other things that, Christian nationalists, conservative, hyper conservative Christians are very sensitive about, they now turn that into he died for Christianity. So now they've attached Jesus to this simply because of the belief and the sprinkling of the scripture. There's some videos, around the internet going around where he is professing his faith and proclaiming that he couldn't do whatever without Jesus and this, that, and the third. So if we're looking at somebody, so then like, who's the definition of a true Christian martyr? I think if we look at, like, of course we could go to the Bible and say the disciples, right? But I feel like the biggest thing is I've been really wrestling with this idea of fruit and fruit of the spirit. Not even wrestling with it. I've been wrestling with it, been navigating it and exploring it. Fruit of the spirit, and the fruit of the spirit always comes back to people and how you treat your neighbor. That you love your neighbor as yourself. And I think that if you are loving your neighbor as yourself, if you are loving your neighbor as yourself because you have decided in your mind and your heart to follow Jesus and to submit to him and to serve him, and if that in turn is the reason why you are killed, I think that would make you a Christian martyr. If it is self-serving, or if it is unclear, or you know what I'm saying? If it is a agenda specific that has nothing to do with glorifying Christ in a crucified and resurrected state, that is not martyrdom. It's not. It's just not. So to Hector's point into the term filling in the gaps, my experience with that was in the prophetic. In the time that I was in ministry, Tiffany and I went to the same church where, I experienced all my stuff. And so what would happen is the spirit of prophecy would fall, right? So you have this service where, ooh, here come the prophets, right? You get a word and you get a word and you get a word and you get a word. Right? So I'll say this though. I know that I know that my spiritual gift, my fivefold spiritual gift is prophecy. So I believe that I'm a prophet. I believe that all Christians can prophesy, but I think prophets are different. So I believe that God has ordained me or positioned me as a prophet. And the one thing that I know about prophecy is that you know in part, you see in part. So you 99% of the time, you don't get these like fully fleshed out words. Shane, the Lord wants me to tell you that starting in 1984, you blah, 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 and just go through your whole life. And then this is exactly how this is going to play out in 2030 and yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. That's not how that works. You see like phrases, you might see a word, you might see a picture, and your job is to communicate exactly what you see and nothing else. So I see a circle. I don't know what that means. I see like a record or something like that. Shane, I don't know what that means. I just see a circle. And then it's like, I'm putting out it looks like a CD. You're like, yeah, I'm about to put an album out. I'm like, okay, cool. So like I don't, if I don't know you, I don't know that, but this is just an example of like what prophecy looks like. But the way that it's presented is they fill in the gaps, because prophecy is when you fill in the gaps, it becomes fortune telling. And then it becomes, Miss Cleo and a crystal ball and all this other stuff, right? So I think in the same way that we've seen it in the church in that way, we're seeing it here with these Christian nationalists. They're filling in the gaps, and that's dangerous. Because I could say, I see this circle, and Shane, that means you're about to leave the earth and live on Mars. And I see a planet, it's red, right? And I just start filling in all these blanks. And now you have this expectation of God. God said he go to his wife, say, baby, God said we gonna live on Mars. You know what I'm saying? And you have this expectation that God is gonna do this thing for you, and he doesn't do it. And now you get mad and you start to resent God because the prophet told me that God said that I was going to do this, or I was going to be on Mars, and it didn't work out that way. But that's on the responsibility of the prophet to only communicate what they see. To Hector's point, all we know is that this dude got shot. We don't know why. We don't know who. We have ideas. We can speculate, but ultimately, we don't know. And when you get into those spaces, when you start filling in the gaps, it's dangerous. It's harmful. It is why deconstruction runs so rampant, because somebody was given a full prophetic word or something happened to them, and now their expectation of God became something that God himself did not communicate and was not in his will for you. So yeah, I hope that parallel made sense.
Very much so,
Okay,
at least for
cool.
me.
Cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it made
So
sense. I mean, I would assume based on everything you guys have shared about this guy is that, he just didn't seem like a good person. So I feel like when you're publicly, sharing these ideals, I feel like you're gonna gain some enemies just in
Yeah.
general.
One
yeah.
other thing to add to that, just like I know we keep on talking about like people that are on the opposite side of the spectrum, but there are
Mhm.
people that are further right than him that don't like him because they don't feel like he's far enough right. So we literally have no idea who did this. It could have been somebody that's on the complete opposite side of the spectrum that just didn't think that he was radical enough and disagreed with something. And it's like
Yeah.
infighting for all we know. But that's the
Mm.
problem with trying to jump to conclusions because you don't have all the information. But it's a very easy when you aren't like a lot of people don't pay attention to the far right. Let's just start with that. Like people don't pay attention to like the side that they don't agree with. So they only know a little bit about things that happen over there on the opposite side. So it's hard to really like so when you learn about something, it's like you just like fill in the blanks with the information that you know that seems like it would make sense. But when when there's a complete and total blind spot, then it's hard to really even like realize that hey, maybe we need more information because this isn't as cut and dry as it seems. Like
Mhm.
it literally could have been anybody for anything.
And that speaks to like the culture of polarization that it like runs rampant present day, where everything has to be aggressively black or aggressively white, and we need answers right now. And everything becomes, we've been talking about this on Clock Radio speakers for years, right? The albums are either classic or trash 10 minutes after they come out. And now that theology or that mindset has now gone just into public discourse and how we treat people and how we assess situations. We feel like we have the insight on everything and we know the right answer as soon as the thing happens. And we won't even, because we have that dopamine constantly refreshing, we don't even give patience time to have its perfect work and to unravel and to like allow things to play out. Because Jordan, I never thought about that. I feel like I have an idea of the type of person who likely did this, but I didn't even think about it potentially being infighting because I didn't have that additional context about the far right. It's like, oh, shoot, here's another piece of the puzzle that we don't know. We should probably like sit down and shut up. But I think my problem about this is less about Charlie Kirk himself and more about who he represents and now how his dead body is being positioned to represent. It's like a bloodstained banner of so many things and so many points that people feel like they have to make to justify themselves, their belief system, their life, how they treat other people. You know what I'm saying? I have so many hot takes that I want to say, but I want to talk about with that. I want to talk about this concept of spiritual bypassing and connect that to like sanitizing his message in death. Is everybody familiar with what spiritual bypassing is?
As of earlier
Okay.
today, yes, based off our
Yes.
conversation.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I told Jordan earlier today, like, yeah, because I just got hip like 2 months ago, something like that.
I don't know
There's
what
a
it is.
So spiritual bypassing is essentially when you when something happens and then people just like hyper Jesus it, like we'll just pray or God's in control, and there's no emphasis on practical, human steps that we have to do. And what that does is that gives people a reason to avoid accountability and avoid responsibility for the role that they play or the role that they have to play in a situation playing out or rectifying and reconciling a situation. Simply to say, you know, as long as I got King Jesus, I don't need nobody else, is like the epitome of spiritual bypassing.
Oh, you put my business out there, bro. I thought this was a safe space, bro.
So that theology is dangerous because God created us to need people, right? Like, we look at Adam and Eve strictly from a romantic sense, but no, like, he needed another person to help him. Like, that has nothing to do with it. And for those of us, you know, who are married, we know that, like, or in relationship, we know that, like, the romantic part is what? It's, I won't say it's a certain percentage, but a larger percentage is like that help. You know what I'm saying? And so have you guys been seeing that sort of spiritual bypassing? Have y'all been seeing that in as it relates to all this Charlie Kirkery? And if so, how?
I would say the main way I've seen it is, again, it kind of goes into some of the other things that we mentioned, as like, especially going into like making it about the differences of opinion, and even just like even just seeing like someone post about like, you know, we can have a different opinion, but even like, let's remember that people even said, Jesus had a demon and everything. And so, being baffled, and like, we can't waste too much time, time on this. Cause like, if this, we should be focused on evangelizing to the lost. And I'm like, it's like, y'all don't realize how y'all don't be talking to non-Christians to be knowing like how folks be looking at Christians right now and it shows. That's one of the things I realized. Some of y'all do not talk to non-Christians.
And they're in their bubble. There's no
Yeah.
reason for many of them to not do that.
Because and even getting onto that for them, especially evangelicalism, like evangelism is more about a conquest or colonization than it is actually about conversation with people.
I would say for me, I honestly have not been seeing a lot of that from Christians, mostly because I do not really have much Christian content on my timeline by choice. Because I just realized a long time ago that I don't fundamentally agree with a lot of takes that Christians have on anything that goes on in the world. And I'm saying this as a Christian, like, let me just say that I still identify as a Christian. I just I just can't engage with the content. Like, it doesn't, a lot of it just doesn't sit right with me. I think the thing for me where I see that what I guess would be similar to spiritual bypassing is when you start looking at the way that you have some like white people reacting to everything. Because it's very easy as a white person to look at the things that he said and kind of like not really understand the insanity of the things that he's saying, but two, how terrible these things are. Because if you're in your white bubble, you don't know how harmful the things that he's saying about Black people are. And you don't I literally had a conversation with a friend right after Trump got elected, or I'll say acquaintance. And like, he was posting Charlie Kirk clips and talking about how he didn't think that he would be this conservative because he thought he was more liberal like in college, but now he's like much more conservative. And having that conversation for me made me realize that that's where that's like my realization of like spiritual bypassing comes into play. Because a lot of times what I've noticed is when it comes to people that say anything with Christianity, Christians' brains just turn off. They hear you say Jesus, and they hear you say Jesus and that you are against abortion, and they're just like, yes, that's my guy. And like, even in that conversation I had with my friend, like, that was the one thing that he basically said. He was talking about like this abortion stance. Now, like, just like he, in his mind, being anti-abortion is like a Christian stance. But I'm like, I'm in Christian spaces where that is not the case. Like, but when you're in your bubble, you don't realize that there are people that that on paper you agree with on like when it comes to like faith, but when it comes to some of the more, I don't want to downplay it like it's small, but like when you start looking at like the more granular things that people believe, that's probably the best way to say it. The more granular things that people believe, it starts to diverge. And a lot of that is because, I mean, conservatives have a tendency to hate this, but there's a lack of intersectionality. Like the lack of intersectionality makes it where it's very hard to understand that people have different experiences and different challenges and different perspectives on the exact same subject.
Because
I don't know where I'm going with it.
No, you're fine. No, I got you, because I was talking about this with my wife earlier today. In a lot of those cases, they treat the Bible like a parent who says, because I said so. Like, I remember when what happened a couple years ago? Was it Roe v. Wade, or what was that when they like made abortion? What was that?
Yeah, that's when they repealed Roe v. Wade.
Yeah. So when they appealed that, prior to me marrying my wife, I thought I was anti-abortion because I thought I was supposed to be. Yeah, I'm a Christian. Yeah, so no, life and Jesus and and this is, But my wife really just explained to me like the context that potentially comes with a woman becoming pregnant. Like, what if she was raped, or what if she was, there's a circumstance that maybe she doesn't have the resources that she needs and she's not equipped to take care of the baby, and it puts her in a really, really difficult and a tough spot, or she just doesn't want the baby. Should she have autonomy to choose, or should the government say whether she chooses or not? And I feel like the real Christian response should be pro-choice, because we choose the same way that we choose to follow Jesus, the same way that we choose to submit, the same way that, you know what I'm saying? The same way we make it a choice. We have choice in just everywhere, right? But with the hope, because even Jesus said like, yo, I you know what I'm saying? I present to you life or death, in hoping that you choose life, right? I feel like that's the stance, but I share that experience to say I kind of like started going off on social media like, yo, this is foul. This is not right. There is a Christian hip hop telegram with all these like hyper conservative Christian rappers. And I mean, look, you know who, like, if you can think of hyper conservative Christian rappers and who they are, they're in that chat. And I was in that chat for a long time. I got into it with with a Christian rapper. And I was like, nah, I'm cool. I'm good. And I excused myself. But I just randomly went in there, and because I got tagged. That's what happened. I got tagged. And they were like talking about me. Like they screenshotted my tweets. And they were like, yo, Armand doesn't believe in abortion. And they were tagging me to come into the chat to explain myself. But I have my notifications turned off. And I said, I don't owe y'all niggas nothing. I'm not going in there for y'all to try and jump me with your hyper conservative rhetoric. Like, y'all don't want to have a conversation, to bring that back to Charlie Kirk. Like, I had a conversation with somebody this morning, and he was like, yo, do you hear about what happened? Man, this guy, he just got killed. He got killed for just his beliefs, for a difference of opinion. And he was debating people, and he was just like making space for people to share their beliefs. And I said, I had time, because I was on my voice note. I was talking like 3 or 4 people on the way, like, can you believe this? Like, I'm driving to work. I ran a red light, like just hot, right? So I had energy when I came into the office, like, nah. And I said, now I said a difference of opinion is, I don't think Freddie Gibbs can rap, and you do. That's a difference of opinion. You love this movie and I hate it. That's a difference of opinion.
Was that a hypothetical?
No, I don't think he can rap.
Okay, well, I'll pin that.
Yeah, I don't think he can rap. We can talk about that offline. No, he raps very fast and says a lot of nothing. And I've been saying that as somebody who's listened to him since like 2010. I don't think he can rap. Anyway, I said, yo, don't throw me off, man. I'm joking.
Cut the CRS episodes in the middle of this.
Right. But I said, yo, these debates were not for people to hear each other out. Like, did someone actually have the potential to change Charlie Kirk's mind? Is there a clip where he's like, yo, I never thought about it that way. You're absolutely right. Let me chill on that. I didn't see one. His stance and his position was just peak white man and just like, I feel entitled because I have the right answer and you don't. And so I'm going to tell you why you're wrong. And he's debating all these like young college kids who were all zeal with no wisdom. Yeah, he's going to win that argument.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like he's gonna slice through that because it doesn't.
Twice their age now.
He's twice their age. What do I look like debating with a 19-year-old? Nigga, I'm 40. What do I look like? Sit down somewhere, right?
So there's a term that I've heard going around because there are some people that really feel like this is more once you get into like the political space, but there is this whole idea of the quote unquote marketplace of ideas and stuff like that, and how debate is good. And I, forever ago, like within like years ago, came to the conclusion, debate doesn't solve anything. The people that go around and like are career debaters, there are some of them that they don't have any kind of political stance. They will just pick a topic and debate. Keep in mind, I was homeschooled. I was in a debate class where I had to debate both sides of an argument as a kid. And that's where a lot of people's frame of reference is. It's all about winning the argument. So it's never about like finding the actual truth or understanding someone else's perspective. It's all about beating your opponent. And that's literally all he has done. Like he literally just would go around from college campus to college campus, let people come up with their own topics, and then he would talk over them. And then the bigger this got, the larger the crowds got. So if anybody said anything that sounded weird to them because they weren't familiar with, they were uninformed, they would have reactions. Like there's a clip of a guy talking to him, debating him, and he's trying to explain what DEI is. And he's trying to give an example where he's like, DEI is not about like just hiring Black people. He's like, let's say that like your daughter is like an adult and she works a job. Like the company having tampons in their office is inclusion. And everybody, when he said tampons, freaked out and stopped listening because they're like, why are you talking about his daughter like that? And it's like, he was just trying to help him understand, like, hey, this is something that could benefit one of your own people. But like, they don't care about the actual like understanding what the actual subjects. It's all just about like getting your point out and then monetizing it. Because that's really all this is. It's just energizing your base so they give you money so you can become a millionaire. Because like, I'm pretty sure, I think I saw something earlier. Turning Point USA was like worth 50 million or something like that. And he alone was worth 12 million. This had nothing to do with trying to change people's minds. This was just about making money. It had nothing to do with trying to share his thoughts.
As you talk about that, it reminds me of a thought I had when it came to like politics and relating this like in debates. Because as I forgot when I mentioned it, but debating and politics feels like battle rap sometimes. It's like just because you're a good battle rapper does not mean you can be a good album artist or anything like that. And just because you're a good debater does not mean you can be a good politician. And I feel like that going back to what you mentioned about debate being good for the public square, it's like if it's about winning the argument, then it's not really beneficial. If it's actual like genuine dialogue, that's what's beneficial towards the public square.
Yeah. So, couple things, and I hope to try and make this short because I've been just like writing little notes.
Go for it.
So from the spiritual bypassing conversation, I promise it's going to make sense. But like talking about the pro-choice, Armand, of like the pro-choice doesn't cancel out like pro-life, right? You're like, no, I'm widening that umbrella, right?
That's right.
But the spiritual bypassing and the certainty that I am right is a Calvinist, white evangelical, like it's like one and one, right? And so from that comes the like, my argument is right. And so I don't care about what evidence you bring. My argument is right. Therefore, it is my job to convince you why you're wrong and a heathen. I just took an ethics class for technology, but just the idea of ethics. One of the things that stuck out to me was when they were talking about debate and talking about argument and opposing opinions and arguments, is that the idea of debate, an ethical debate, is not that you walk away a winner, is that you have to understand the other person's argument. Then your aim should be to help them make their claim clearer, concise, and more like with more support. And then still, like, the idea is that now that it's clearer, you still disagree, but now you can actually talk to their argument, not just that you won, you know? And so the idea that you are doing the work of trying to understand. Jordan said that earlier, that it's not about understanding, it's just about winning, you know?
Yeah. Something else to, oh, sorry, you can go.
No, go ahead.
No, I thought you were, you can keep on going and finish your thought.
No, I'm good. Like that covered everything.
okay.
I was just like, I've been just
Yeah.
seeing the thread, you know?
Yeah. You just made me think of something though. Like this is something from my childhood. When I was younger, the church that I went to brought in an apologist, or whatever you want to call him. He had a book called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, and they taught us how to do apologetics and respond to like objections that atheists might have and questions and things like that. And at the time, like I was in debate. I enjoyed argument. I like debating things, and I like talking to people that I don't agree with. So like I was really into it. But as I got older, this is kind of what made me check out of apologetics. As I got older, after I took that class and after I did all that stuff, I kind of realized that this is all just about winning an argument and trying to outsmart your opponent. So like one of the things that like I remember was like an argument was that like there's no such thing as absolute truth. Like if somebody says that, and then you can be like, are you absolutely sure? And stuff like that. And it's like trying to just win an argument. I'm like, if your goal is to like convert somebody to Christianity, that's not going to do it. Just out arguing them and out logicking them is not going to make someone a Christian. Like that never works. It's part of why I've kind of just lost interest in the idea of trying to convert people. I'm like, I can't do any of that. I'll share my opinions and my worldviews with people, and they might change their mind. They might become a Christian. They might not. But it's not my place to do that. I'm just going to share my worldview, and they can just take it or leave it. But it's a very strong.
Jordan, just to that point real quick, if I don't want to deviate too far from the conversation, but I would almost challenge that a bit to say that part of my journey to grow my relationship and to get closer to God outside of the fact that I was getting married was the fact that I have a lot of friends who practice Islam. And it's very common in one of the group chats I'm in for them to say inshallah.
Yep.
And I said it one day, like in text, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, I started using these hands emoji, right? And, you know, in my mind, I was just showing them respect, like, right? Like, but they took that as a sign that, oh, maybe he's seeking this information, right? Like that was like a call to action on my part, right? And so as a result of that, they begin, and at least in my experience, like people who practice Islam don't recruit in the way that I have been recruited consistently throughout my life throughout in Christianity, right? It doesn't work the same way, at least not again my experience. But that experience brought me closer to God because I started realizing, or Jesus, because I started realizing that like, hey, there's this thing that's been put in front of me, right, for most of my life, and I never really like dove into like what it was supposed to look like for me, sort of. And I think Armand and Hector kind of tapped into that, like the earlier, like that journey is not necessarily like linear. So like, I don't know if you have a rebuttal or if even, and I didn't intend for this to be like a debate or whatever the case is, but just like more or less like kind of responding to what you just said about, um, you don't even try anymore. I would encourage you to keep that door open because there's people like me that like, I need that. Like I needed to see that like, Armand raps like in his raps, like you hear God in his raps. And I think he's a phenomenal rapper. I'm like, yo, this he nuts. Like but he talking that talk, but
Yeah.
God is in there, and I just didn't see that from other guys. So yeah,
Yeah.
just curious.
No. But what you're describing is what I'm talking about, though. Like, I think there's a difference between like building like somebody just being their self, and like if you're a Christian, it's gonna come up. Like, I literally just bring up being a Christian in conversation with people, and it doesn't matter. Like, I'm just being myself. But when I say I'm not trying to convert people and trying to like do things like that, more of what I'm talking about is being so obsessed with the numbers and the conversion rate
Mhm.
that like I'm trying to optimize my sales pitch for becoming a Christian. That
Mhm.
is the part that I am kind of like I've checked out of. I'm like, I don't need to do all that. Like, and a lot of this stems from like when I was younger, I was working at FCA camps, Fellowship Christian Athlete camps, and I was a huddle leader. So like I was always doing the devotionals and stuff like that. And like I would see all these different people like at the end of the camp, they would always do a call to like discipleship and stuff like that. And I remember one camp I was at, it seemed like everybody's huddle had a bunch of kids, or the entire kid group was like becoming Christians, and my entire huddle was like, I'm good. So I thought something was wrong with me as a result, because I'm like, dang, all these people are like converting, and it was like making me feel like I was a bad Christian for not being able to convince somebody to be a Christian. And just having that in the back of my mind as I got older, that's how I kind of got to the conclusion that it's like, oh, well, at the end of the day, people say this all the time, but people don't really mean it this way. It's not my responsibility to save somebody. That's God that does that.
Mhm.
So I shouldn't be like so obsessed with the idea of knowing that I converted somebody to Christianity, that I'm trying to do all these things, optimize it, trying to figure out the logic and trying to figure out how to explain this to somebody where all of a sudden they're like, oh, it makes sense. For all I know, I have a conversation with somebody and they don't become a Christian for 3 years down the road, and I never see them again, and I never know that. But it's not my job to know that and to know the number of people that are like becoming Christians because they interacted with me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's more of what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, and I actually just this last year, um, I went to the same barber, down the street. In a lot of like early on, a lot of in that vein of like, I got to go talk to this guy. Like it's captive time. Like he can't tell me no because he's trying to get paid, right? Like you think about, I may not have voiced that, but that's like motivations, right? It's like, why am I having this conversation? I remember the switch of like, dude, I just want to go like support this guy because he's in the neighborhood and it's expensive to make it in the neighborhood. And he's out here cutting hair, and I could go get a haircut in Seattle for 60, $70. This guy's charging 25. Right? Let me meet him in the middle, right? Let me bless him. Let me meet him in the middle. And and let's chop it up and let's go have, lunch. And all my conversations with him, never like, hey man, like I want to know more about Jesus. It was always that like conversation. We were having a conversation. Man, I've been away from Seattle for 3 years. And he hits me up. Man, I'm getting baptized. What? He goes, yeah, dude, I got into a crash. I broke my leg. Uh, and then I was driving without a license. So I tried to take a flight and they locked me up. And I met this dude, and like, so I just remember, and like, I remember our conversation. So I wanted to call you, like, I'm going to get baptized, man. And like, now he's serving, and he's always been that community person, right? And just the idea of, I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to do that. I knew that guy for 6, 7, 8 years. It wasn't me. But even the fact that like he wanted to call, and to take like to be able to celebrate that rather than be like, dang, bro, they snatched one from me. Let's take that off the chalkboard. It's not a real one, that numbers.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I have similar stories like that with a couple of my friends that I didn't even know they started going to church. But I remember I have one friend, like, I remember when we had just met and his mom passed away like a few months into us knowing each other. And he was just like really torn up about it. And I just brought him to my church because he just was like, he just didn't know what to do. and I had him talk to my pastor and stuff like that at the time. And like nothing ever came of that as far as I was aware. But then like a few weeks ago, like he was texting me and he was like, "Oh, sorry, I missed your call. I was at church." And I was like, "I didn't even know that you were going to church." Cool. Like, it's like, it's not my responsibility to make that conversion in that moment. I don't know when it's going to happen or if it'll ever happen, but it's not my responsibility to like badger somebody over the head and like wear them down. Like, if the way that you become a Christian is because you got tired of hearing Christians trying to convert you, that seems like a bad motive. That doesn't sound like it's
Never.
actually genuine or like you actually want it. It just sounds like you want people to leave you alone. So,
Yeah. You think about that reminds me of like girls who like finally like you thought that guy was ugly. Like, why'd you date him? It's like, well, he was persistent. So I just like gave in and just gave him what he wanted just to get him to leave me alone. And it's like, but you don't even want to,
mhm.
you don't even like him. You know
Now
what
you're
I'm saying? But
stuck.
you don't even like him. So, I'm hear this whole, I want to see if I can thread this because what Meech was talking about in this whole conversation is basically we're just talking about like genuine evangelism, right? And genuine evangelism based off of what the example that Hector showed is like just being yourself. The motive of him connecting and making this relationship with the barber was simply because he wanted to support someone from the community. Hector has a heart for his community. And so what better way than to get my hair cut by the guy down the street? So from that, door opens, we talk about God, blah, 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 blah. Like Hector don't give him a track. Hector doesn't, lay hands on him and tell him to repent. Like he doesn't do any of that stuff. It's like the Bible talks about, one plants, one waters, God gives the increase. The barber has a whole other experience down the line, but he references the conversations that he had with Hector because that was Hector's genuine way of evangelizing was just showing his life, right? The pastors would say, "You may be the only Bible that someone reads," like that corny phrase, but I mean, there's truth to it and validity to it, right? But on the opposite side of that, you get like debates and apologetics, and you also see this like in the 5% space, the Black Hebrew Israelite space, where they're just like talking at each other. So whenever you see a Black Hebrew Israelite on social media, a Black Hebrew Israelite, and they got the purple on and all that stuff, and they look like, never mind, I'm not gonna say that. And then you got like the Christian in their face and they're both just like talking at each other. And then the comments are like, it's like watching a fight because people want to see if their God won. Who can communicate their God better? Because I ultimately want to win. It's funny the way there's that like smug, like winning an argument and doing all that stuff, man. Like I feel like there are aspects of that that's like peak whiteness. Like there's nothing that screams white man more than like wanting to be right and assert dominance over another person's beliefs and in turn belittle them in that process. You know what I'm saying? And I was thinking about a lot of the Black Christians and Christians of color who are, sanitizing Charlie Kirk and doing the spiritual bypassing and we need to pray for him and doing all this stuff. And I wonder if this is a larger point about many people's Christianity really being whiteness. Like you weren't discipled in the Bible, you were discipled in white man. And the Bible was just used as a catalyst to make you more Eurocentric in your thinking. And I think about how dangerous that is because I feel like that's backbreaking. I feel like that's bucking. I feel like that is denying someone of their experience. It is how we multi-ethnic churches always have a white pastor because the white pastor, Black people will sit under a white pastor, but white people will not sit under a Black pastor. You just will not see it. The majority, like John B will do it. You know what I'm saying? But like just your average, like a group of people, no way. There's no way you're going to see that. So it leads to that point of like, when people talk about like the difference, this just being a difference of opinion as to why he was murdered. And I'm like, the opinion was putting people who look like me in danger. It was the difference of opinion was marginalizing people that the Bible calls us to protect, women and children and, disenfranchised and the least of these, right? Poor people, poor financially and poor in spirit, right? And I think that when you get into those weeds, that's not a difference of opinion. That's not a difference of opinion. Like you are, if there was a black man who was murdered the way that Charlie Kirk was murdered, Charlie Kirk would say that it was justified. 100% he would. So I think about this idea of mourning, and we got to mourn. We have to mourn with those who mourn. And he had a wife and he had a kids, and we had a wife, he had a child. And that's something that I've been wrestling with all day, and I want to get y'all's perspective on, because I'm just going to be honest here.
Okay. I actually heard a really good take on this.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
So
go ahead.
Someone was talking about, I heard somebody talk about the fact that they have empathy for the kids because the kids can't choose their parents.
Mm-hmm.
But his wife has stood with him through everything that he says and all the hatred that he creates, which is a cosign of everything that he's doing to some extent. Because I guarantee if I was talking crazy about stuff, my wife might not divorce me, but she's not about to be around. Like, so it's like, I think that a lot of it comes down to the fact that, like, a little bit of that is a scapegoat, in my opinion. Like, to talk about, like, oh, well, like, he had kids and like, he was a husband and a father. And, like, the quote from that video that I saw was somebody said, there's, like, history is riddled with terrible people with families. Are you going to feel bad when a dictator who has a family dies? Like, are you going to, like, mourn him or mourn his death because he had a wife and kids? And it's like, I think that, and like, there are a lot of people that, like, just for them in general, like, death is a very touchy subject. But at the same time, my question is, if we were to change all this around, and let's say, like, you were in the 1940s, I literally saw somebody ask this question today in another debate thing, because all that stuff is on my timeline right now because of him. Somebody asked the question, would you be upset if a Jewish person killed Hitler because he had people that loved him? Would you mourn him because there were people that loved him? And it's like, I understand the sentiment of trying to think about the people that are affected by his death, but at the same time, he also created this environment and basically preached against empathy in the first place too. On top of that, he called it a new age thing. So it's not even like, so it's like we're trying to mourn and show empathy. Someone who, like you said, if it was like he said with George Floyd, he called George Floyd a scumbag and thought that the police that killed him should be pardoned by Trump. So I'm like, I don't think that just because he has a different view of me that I don't need to show empathy per se, but also at the same time, I don't have to mourn him just because he had a family. I think it really just comes down to your own individual convictions. But right now, for me, it's just very hard for me to try to mourn the loss, like a family's loss of somebody, when that person has a documented history of being who he was. And you can make the argument, like, there are people that would make the argument, like, but he could have, like, there was always an opportunity to change. But you can't celebrate the change unless it's made. There was no intent or any he had no intent to change at all from what we can see. Like, going back to what you were talking about, like with the fruits of the spirit, like, if you look at the fruits of everything that he's created, nothing in that says that he is a person that, this is going to sound really harsh, nothing that he has done indicates that he is a person worthy of mourning, to me. And while, yes, it is sad that his family, that now his kids are going to be raised without their father, that's more consequences of his actions more than it is anything.
Yeah, the thought was, when he went out and spewed this hateful rhetoric, he wasn't mindful of his family. So then why should I? Right? There's also on the opposite side of that is like, well, because he's a human, he's an image bearer of God. And so we have to have, so we have to mourn him in that way. And I don't feel anything.
Yes.
I don't feel sad. And I'm not celebrating, but I feel nothing. Is that okay as a Christian to not feel anything in this case?
My question in
I
response
would
to
say,
that,
yeah.
yeah, and my question in response to that is all the people that
Yeah.
are telling you that you need to mourn him, how are they responding to Palestine and Israel?
That's
Because
right.
this is
Yep.
that's a disproportionate, like, this is just like, there's so many people that are dying, and if you're talking about mourning and, like, saying that this is bad and this needs to like, that we need to, like, do something about this, look at what's going on over there. There's
Mhm.
there's literally a genocide going on right now over in, Gaza, and the same people that are saying that we should be mourning his loss are also the same people that are pro-Israel because it fits the end times prophecy that they have interpreted creatively in Revelations.
Well, I could talk about that
I
for
can
weeks on that, but I
Hey,
will not
sorry, Shane.
derail on that. I will not do that. I will say this, especially about the mourning piece. I think it's definitely people trying to dictate how others should feel, and even going
That's
back to like,
oppression.
yeah, that family thing. It's like I'm like Martin Luther King had a family, Medgar Evers had a family, Malcolm X
Right.
had a family.
And they trying to put him with they trying to put him with them. They're like, this is the most traumatic American assassination
Gonna
since Martin Luther King.
First of
Trump
all,
announced he's
y'all
getting
did
the
not like
Medal of
King when he was
Freedom.
alive.
exactly. That's my thing.
Don't try to
Yeah.
act like y'all did.
They like the whitewashed
Another
version of
thing,
him.
yeah. Another thing is I like
Yeah,
what
they
one of my
whitewashed.
friends shared about him learning Christianity from Nigeria is they became comfortable with like imprecatory prayers. So like the imprecatory psalms, if you don't, the psalms that talk up that where you see people talking about like, judgment and God being, pour out your indignation on them and let your burning anger overtake them. So like that's from like Psalm 69 and those comments. And so in that aspect of it, it's like recognizing, like, as we kind of said, is like he talked a lot of hatred. And so it's like there are people that are relieved that his ideas and his rhetoric does not get to live on because has been so harsh and even abusive. And so in one sense, for some people, it's like you're asking like, why are why aren't people mourning? I'm like, why does a sheep not mourn the death of a wolf?
And I would even take it a step further and say that his rhetoric is going to live on now even more because he's dead. They're going to use him as justification to not only continue his legacy, but further it and cement it in American culture. It's going to get worse.
Yeah.
And that is what I'm most fearful of. And that's why I asked about martyrdom when you asked us at the beginning of the call what was the topics that we wanted to discuss, because I dropped two links in the chat, and Tiffany, I know you ain't gonna be able to see them, but one of them is a list of HBCU closures
Mm-hmm.
and stay in place orders today.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about less than
Yeah.
24 hours. Like,
Somebody
whoa, what?
somebody brought a gun to my son's school today.
Come on,
Shit.
man. Like I personally, my personal belief is that this was not committed by somebody that looks like anybody on this call, and I'll just leave it at that, right?
They've already
But
released a photo of the guy. He's not.
oh, I've been at a conference all day, so
Yeah,
I didn't I might have missed that. But
no, it's a white man.
so with that, it's like, was this like to Charlie's point in his statement? He said one of you guys mentioned earlier that he said something to the degree of like, collateral damage, or in so many words, like, right, like this needs to happen in order for the Second Amendment to like justify it or whatever the case is.
Mhm.
And like, what does that mean for us though? Like, right, like, and like you see like the homies from like Chicago and LA like jumping online or whatever the case is, making their
Thank you,
little
Tiffany.
statement.
Sorry, didn't mean to cut off anybody, but bye, guys.
Nah,
Yeah,
Bye.
I gotta hop
pleasure.
off too, but this was dope, and
Yeah,
I
this is
hope
super
y'all
tight.
guys keep
Yeah,
going. Meech, great to hear from you. Jordan, thank you so much, because I think you brought a lot of perspective and a lot of
Yeah.
context that like doesn't, a lot of the places we went, like that glue of the context. So I'm just super thankful for that, and
No problem.
I gotta get going, but
Yeah.
for sure.
just
Yeah,
Armand, I
we're gonna
appreciate this
we're
so
gonna wrap
much.
up in 10 minutes. We're gonna wrap up 10:30ish.
Yeah.
We'll
All right.
wrap up.
For creating
you
this
guys.
space, Mon.
Of course, of course. I'll hit
Bye.
you later. So I have this thought about all this connecting and it being with like sanitizing and how harmful that is. Because I'm thinking about when you sanitize his message and you're not honest about uh like what he's saying and who he is. You make it hard. This is really an opportunity for like this would preach, as the kids say, or as the old folks say. In a sense of, I think of somebody like a DMX. Throughout DMX's life, we saw his struggle with light and dark. We heard him pray on his albums. We saw him cry. We saw him really like credit the Lord, but we saw his demons. We saw his misogyny. We saw his drug use. We saw his violent behavior. We saw his destructive behavior. We saw it. So in death, DMX gets a lot of grace. People don't bring up his mess. You know what I'm saying? That he was complicated, and people don't give him smoke. You know what I'm saying? Because they see and I feel like there's empathy that understands the context of his life. When you say, let's say Charlie Kirk is the Christian of Christians. Let's just say that his profession is genuine. But you negate the fact that his rhetoric is harmful and dangerous, and he said some really messed up things that he never atoned for. When you try to like Christianese your way out of that, and you're essentially being dishonest about his life and who he is, you keep God from entering into that space and providing a grace that none of us can provide as humans. We can't do it. And you don't give us space to be like, hey, God, I ain't got it for him. You're going to have to make the difference because this dude is on trash. But when you try to cover and justify and, add to the shenanigans, you don't give him an authentic opportunity to present as he is.
So I have a response to that. But in order to respond, we have to walk completely outside of the context of this as a Christian conversation and as turn it into a political conversation.
Okay.
Something that happens on the far right that is an active attempt right now is to normalize all of these extreme views and ideologies. So,
like what they do with Jubilee.
yes, that's actually a good example. Like there was one that they did with what's his name? He's like a journalist, Mehdi Hassan.
Yeah.
And there's the
That
one
was a
guy.
good one.
Yeah,
That was
and that one
wild.
guy, like that one guy was saying the quiet part out loud. Like
Yes, he
all of
was.
these things, are done in an attempt to basically platform their ideas and their ideologies. So while we're having a Christian conversation, there are people outside of this space that are using this opportunity, because he was one of them to some extent, to basically whitewash it and just say, "Oh, it was just complicated. He was a he just had a difference of opinion." Because a lot of what's happening right now is there are far right neo-Nazis that are trying to make people ask the question, was Hitler really that bad? So
Right.
if they're already practicing with one of the people that we've already closed the book on whether he was good or bad, imagine how easy it's going to be for them to do that with somebody who hasn't even actively played a role in the actual death of in an actual death of a large number of a population. Like this is like a cakewalk for them. And this is where I kind of get to the point of like my views of like like what the Christian, what was it? The spiritual bypassing, like where like your
Yeah,
critical thinking just goes off. As Christians, it's very easy for like Christians are very naive. Let me just say that. Like
absolutely.
they're the thing that I like to say is that there is so much insanity that you have to believe in to be a Christian that it makes it very easy for you to fall down a rabbit hole of conspiracy theory.
Absolutely.
And because of that,
And I don't think you're a Christian if you haven't done that at some point.
Mhm.
It's part of the journey before you're like, nah.
fortunately, I worked through that when I was a kid. So
There you go.
by the time I got to
There you
college,
go.
I had already hit that wave. Like, but also I was a kid during that peak wave of like the whole everything's Illuminati wave. So
Absolutely.
I got
Yep.
to experience that as a kid and work through it, and then come to the conclusion that all this is kind of just seeing what you want to see in a lot of this stuff. But
Absolutely.
as a result, Christians are just very ill equipped to actually handle somebody who actually is much more than just a Christian, because he's not just a Christian. Like,
Mm.
he is a political. I don't know what the best word to use. I know they've been using the word political activist. He is a
Vehicle,
yeah, he's a political influencer before he's a Christian in the way that he
for
presents himself.
sure.
So
Agreed.
his goal is not necessarily to make to like convert people to Christianity. If he was doing that, he'd be going about this completely different. His goal is
Absolutely.
to basically, his goal was basically to basically inspire people to be on board with his ideas about what the world, what America should be, which when it comes down to it is a white ethno state.
That's
That's
right.
what he wanted. It had nothing to do about Christianity. It was about having a white state, that a country that is specifically for white people. And then he just happened to say that he was a Christian. And not only that, Christian nationalist, which is a completely different thing when you start looking at what that means.
That's right.
But this has been a very long concerted effort to be able to do these kind of things, and it's very easy to do that with Christianity because since the 1950s, 60s, there has been a effort by Christians to masculinize Jesus and Christianity. There's a book called Jesus and John Wayne that kind of details this whole
Yep.
thing that's been happening.
Yep.
And when you read through it and you realize a lot of this has very little to do with like Christianity, like this is just white men being white men
Absolutely.
It's
Yes.
about
and being
preservation.
imperialist and capitalist and all these things.
Preservation. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. When you really get into the weeds like that, they're scared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even
They're
going
scared.
back, even
Go
going
ahead,
back
go
to
ahead.
that persecution conversation, it's like people. What's really happened has been the loss of privilege, and they've called it persecution,
That's right.
and that is what evangelicalism is experiencing, and it makes them afraid of not being the prominent power, which is why it's something. It's something that I realized a long time ago. Just quick story. I actually told it to priests when I was in Columbus. It's like modern day Christianity is like the Sadducees back in the day, because the Sadducees was a group of religious people that they came into power because of the fact of like, they're trying to preserve the temple and all that stuff. Rome came, and so that they didn't get swallowed by Rome, they adopted Herod into their fold to be able to get them some protection. And the thing about Herod is like, he wasn't a Jew, but they were going to like, yo, if we align with him, we can protect our way of life. This is the same thing I see with evangelicalism with Trump. It's like, like, if we can align with him, we can protect our way of life.
That's right.
But it's all for the sake of this perceived idea that people are trying to get rid of Christians in America.
Mm-hmm.
Because
There's like overlap and like it's muddied, right?
yeah, and but something that I learned from reading that Jesus and John Wayne book is like people like Billy Graham basically didn't become a Christian initially because he thought that Jesus was too soft and sissy. And when he became a Christian, he tried to masculinize him and make it more about war and make it about like othering. because a lot of it, like, we're saying that it's about like evangelicalism, and it's not. It's about race. Like, that's where the perception of loss of power is, because Christians are gonna exist regardless. But the thing that is like the scariest thing that does actually have a possibility of that, like, statistically has been shown to be on track to change, is the spread of like diversity in America, where white people
Yeah.
become a minority. And that's what they're
Minority,
really,
I'm about to say.
that's what they're scared of. It has nothing to do with being scared that they won't be able to be Christian. They say that
That's right.
because it gets people on their side. And
That's
one
right.
thing that like going back to that Jubilee debate, one thing that one of the guys said was like, because like he got called out for like basically wanting a white ethno state, and like there were people there that weren't white, and he's like, well, I mean, some people can help get there, even if they're not. So by doing this, by weaponizing Christianity, it gets a bunch of different people to get on board with this whole idea of Christian nationalism, because they hear Christian and they're like, and they think like, well, yeah, Christians should be involved in the government. Christians like, we should use, like, God is the moral authority, and that's where we should pull our morality from, and all these things. And it's like all these things that, like, what's the quote about, like, first they came for the communists and nobody did anything, then they came for the Jews, then that nobody did anything. And it basically just goes down the list until it gets to, and then they came for me and there was nobody to stop them. And it's literally just trying to get people on their side that are going to help them get to where they want to be. And then once they get to where they want to be, you're no longer of use to them. And now you're part of the out group, because the in group was never Christianity. The in group was always white. And that definition will always get narrower on top of that.
Jesus. All right. Okay. So I wanna, that's a good place to at least put a pin, because there's so much to say. I just want to open the floor. If anybody has anything else that they want to say that they weren't able to say throughout the conversation, I wanna open up the floor. Nah, everybody good?
I talked enough.
Hearts and minds clear?
Jordan
No, man.
did a good job.
Yeah, you did a great job. Thank you for context and you know, sharing stories and pushback and all that stuff, man. No, this was great. This was great. This was great. This was great. So, I don't know what the takeaways are. I don't know what the follow-up is. I'll try to like sit down and figure that out and see what that looks like. I'll probably get with Meech and see like, yo, what do we do with this? But this was unbelievable. So thank you guys for taking out your Thursday nights to rock. So I'm gonna let y'all get back to y'all's families and all that good stuff. I'll have this up in the morning for hey man, you guys have a good night. Appreciate y'all.
Appreciate you too.
No
Night,
problem.
everybody.
Yep.
Night.
All right,
See ya.
later.
Peace, fellas.